As we try to finish the sim today, just want to everybody give a shout out and Yashikar to Drawer for always arranging these meetings and recording them and sending them back out right away.
Drawer.
Stroke the door.
And for what he does off the chat also, Rabbi. He does on the chats also. He's
very involved, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Dor has something to say. As we say in Yiddish, it's a naya door. Okay, we spoke about that a lot when we learned mezuzah. There's always a new door. But never any pun intended. Okay, so we're up to. Just want to speak out some small points. Nothing's really small, but Sifhei through hopefully the end of the Siman today, and then later today, Mr. Shem will send out the Bechina, so we can have the next days over coming towards Purim and after Purim for the next couple of days to be able to work through the Bechina. So in Sifhei, Yesh Mish Omer the Davar Shenecho Nitzle in Bishlu Acharkach Mamashke Yeshavu Shum Bishol. The Shita say Yereim Lazar Mimitz Yereim that there's Bishol Achar Afia and also Litan Afilu B'chli Sheni Shiatzaledisbo. Since there's Bishol Achar Afia, so you can't even put it in a Kli Sheni. Yesh Matirim or Masas B'chli Sheni. Yesh Matirim is only B'chli Sheni, not Matirim. Period. Yesh Makilim Afilu B'chli Rishon. So, in other words, the Yesh Matirim, the Marmos Masbir, the Shulchan Aruch, that's not going on the Klal, it's going on just this Chumrah of Kli Sheni, but not Legami to be Mekel. And the Yesh Makilim and Legami, even at Kli Rishon, is the Cholak on this whole Yesod. If you remember the Beis Yosef, so that the Araim brought a raya from Matzah, that Matzah Mevushelis is puzzle for matzah for a little seder, and that was his raya that if it stayed the same, if Bishol didn't change it, then why should it be puzzle for matzah? So Balkroch, we see from here, yes, Bishol for Afia, and it's mafkia the baked essence of it to become now a davar bushel, which is puzzle for a matzah. And the other Rishonim, the Beis Yosef brought down a cholik on the Uraim, hold that it's not a raya for matzah because ba'inin tam matzah v'leka, that there it's a special din by matzah. You need tam matzah, like you find also you need tam morer. That's why if you have a yirakos that are shlukim that are like just in water overnight, even though they actually get cooked, but they lose their tam morer also. So those things matzah morer, they need tam matzah, tam morer. So it's a special din. But mashenken a regular bishul, it's not mafkia the afia and ain bishul achafia. That's a machlokas, but the Shulchan Aruch's pasuk in the Chumrah like to say for Yereim. So we had machlokas a poskim that the Rama ends off saying that yesh mekila and afilu kli rishon. But nagu the minig is lizar lechatchila shaloyit and pas afilu b'kli sheni calls man sheyatzel letisbo. Not even in a kli sheni, as long as it's yatzel letisbo. So the story is because pas, you put matzah or you put pas, these things that are baked like that, baked goods, are considered kalu levashel. They're considered dvarim harakim, which the basis brings down dvarim harakim, things that are especially soft. Then they're kalu levashel. They're easy to cook, and they're easily cooked, and therefore they're even though the chom of a klisheni can be vashel them on Shabbos. So we have certain things that even though they don't have the regular koach habishul for normal things, like we saw earlier, we discussed last year about tea, or Moshe Shita by tea. That in most poskim Recholik or Moshe hold that even in a kli sheni or even in a kli shlishi, because the water's so hot, then if it's enough color levashel, as long as you have heat from a fire, even though it's twice removed, it doesn't have the normal koach habishul, but it's enough to be cooking certain things that are able to be especially even bakalus. So it's called color levashel, lashon kal, easy to cook. Mishnah Berurah adds over here, according to the Ramah, that's machmir by kli sheni. Who would then you should be machmir by putting, let's say, pas in your cholent, because it's a davar gush. Anything's a davar gush, which there's a machlokas about that as well. But we're machmir by davar gush, by a davar, like a large enough cooked object that retains its heat. And part of the svara davar gush, as we spoke about earlier, is that we saw the Tosfos in Daf Mem in Shabbos. We discussed once that the kli sheni, the reason it's not mavashal is because either two ways to learn Tosfos, either because it's missing the starfus of the heat of the kli that was heated on the fire. So you need a unit of hot food plus hot kli for it to have a koach habishal and be mavashal. And if it's a kli sheni that was not heated by the fire, you're missing that siruf, you're missing that unit. Or the other plot was that the kli sheni, the uncooked kli, the unheated kli, cools down the food inside. You don't need a unit. You don't need a unit of the two to cook. Just that if we put it in something which has a koach to cool it down because its walls are cold, then that's why it loses its koach habishal. So a davar gush that doesn't need the kli, it might be in a kli, but it doesn't need the kli because it's not really considered in a kli. Kli doesn't affect it because it doesn't need it. It's a davar, it's davar yavish b'fnei atzmo, so it doesn't cool down and it retains the koach habishal. So that's by dvar mekalim levashal, like or choshesh for yesh bishal hachafia, then should be choshesh also for a davar gush. Now the Mishnah Berurah goes on to say that the marak, you have soup to be is
which sifkatan is that?
Sorry?
Which sifkatan? Mishnah Berurah?
The Mishnah Berurah, I think it was Mem Beis, no? See.
Yes, Mem Beis.
Mem Beis. You would do the Diazu, you're talking about Nami, but tried barring. Shalitim Hazan, Aviyayin Khan. Dover Gushki speaks out in Sivkatan Mem Hey. Kolshkan Fisha, Noagim, Litin of Asalam, to put the onions into a tafshul that's a Dover Gush. Variash Lizarbazet, Yash Poskim, Shasovish, Dover Gush, Munaf Klisheni, Dino Kukli Rishon. And we're machmir for that. So it's putting like an onion is an uncooked. You're putting a raw onion in there, so according to those days, the Dover Gush can vashal the onion. Okay, so now, Mishnah Berurah also says that we should be machmir by the kaf. If you take the kaf is a ladle, you take out the soup with, to not to put pas in there, but only to put it in a kli shlishi. Because like we have this chumras arama over here, so then the kaf is the machmir over. That's a like a kli rishon. You put it, but so we spoke out one time earlier in the sugya, but we'll speak out again here that we have a stira in Mishnah Berurah that here he says that instead of putting it in the kaf, you put it in the soup. It's in the bowl. It's okay because it's already a kli shlishi. So we brought down that everyone asked the stira in the Mishnah Berurah, Torah stira, that later on, I think it's Sivkat and Pei Zion, that he brings that the kaf is considered a kli rishon. The ladle is considered a kli rishon. So if the ladle is kli rishon, then the bowl that you put it into should be a kli sheni. So it should be nichlal in the chumrah of the Ramah. Why is Mishnah Berurah matir to put the pas in the bowl? So we spoke out then the Minchas Yitzchak, Chaim Weiss, is mitaretz that the kaf itself, whether it's a kli rishon, is machmir, it's a kli rishon, but it's not a davar barer that's a kli rishon. So Lagabi itself, we're machmir to put pas into it. It's like putting into a kli rishon. But once you put it into another kli, so now it's already a level down. So now that's in the next level kli. It wasn't a din barer to begin with. It's a kli rishon. It's just we're machmir that way. So now that it's in a kli, in the next kli, that we can make all to say that Lagabi, the next kli, will consider the kaf a kli sheni. To consider this now a kli shlishi, because kli sheni itself is really a chumrah over here. Chumrah sarama is a chumrah. So this chumrah we don't have to be machmer for when we have a tziruf to say that really it's a kli shlishi. To be somewhat on the shitas that hold that is a kli sheni. So in the kaf itself, we're machmer as a kli rishon. But when you get to the bowl, then we consider it a kli shlishi. But tziruf those shitas that hold that the kaf itself is a kli sheni. So that's why the Maisa were makel to put matzah or pas into the soup that's already in a bowl once it got to the bowl. Unless, of course, you poured. If you would have poured from the pot directly into the bowl, then kuliyam it's a klisheni, and the chumash ramah still applies. But if you took it out the normal way with a ladle, so then we consider the bowl a klishlishi. That's why it's not a steer in the Mishnah Berurah. That's what Ravai says. Okay, we also we brought down from Rav Shalom Zalman that there's going to be a little bit to get to a later sif, but over here he spoke about it over here that you're allowed to put the cholent back on the pot onto the. Or maybe we'll wait for this. We'll talk about this later. Let's skip this right now. Okay. What's it din b'di'evet if you did, let's say, put something in a kli rishon, you took pas and put it mamash in a kli rishon. So the Ramah brought down yesh matirim if you look at rishon, but the might say we're not that way. But if a person b'di'evet already put it in a kli rishon, even in a kli rishon, we're going to say it's mutter b'di'evet, going with the klal and the sharua back in Sivkat and Beis, beginning of the Siman, that anything that's tali in a suffix and poskim, machlokes of poskim, then b'di'evet, if it's done, the issue to be nene from it is only an issue d'Rabbanan, and therefore second Rabbanan lakula after the fact. If you already put it in the Rishon, since it's a machlokas over here, whether or not you say yesh bishal achar afiyah, major machlokas are shown in, and it's even it appears in the Ramah as well. He even brings it down. Sometimes you have machlokas are shown that never makes it to the Shulchan Aruch. This one made it to the Ramah that yesh matirim afiyah l'Rishon. Those shitas that hold ein bishal achar afiyah. So it's a stake of Rabbanan, and of course it's going to be mutter b'di'evet after the fact. Any questions before we go on?
We're good.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. Mishnah Berurah also in Sivkat Nun Ches brought down a yisod from the Chai Adam that's machmer even with klisheni when it's yad nichveis bo. That if it's so hot, not just yad soletis bo, that your hand, yad soletis means your hand draws back from it. It's hot that you can just leave your hand in it. Yad nichveis bo means your hand will actually get scalded by it. Speaking of that, I'm just going to dedicate this year the refuas, my grandson who was badly scalded 2 nights ago, was all night in the hospital and from a hot bowl of soup that actually pulled down on himself and a little 2-year-old, and you see how hot that can be. That it can. Yeah, nichveis ba'mamish. It was really scalded badly and surgery and everything. So unfortunately, so Daniel Moshe ben Sipora Hana. So yad nichveis bo has, we see, in mamish scalds. It can get scalded. It can really burn someone. They call that in the hospital. They call it a 2nd-degree burn. It comes from that scalding of really boiling hot water. So there we have a machlokas. So the Chai Adam in the Mishnah brings down is machmer b'klisheni. We have a shaila in poskim. What it is b'klishlishi. The Chazon Ish holds that once yad nichveis bo has such a koach habishol in the water itself, and the kli doesn't manage to cool it down, then the same halakha applies in a klishlishi as well. So the chumash Chai Adam will be, the Mishnah mentions about klisheni, but it'll apply also by klishlishi. That's a Chazon Ish. Or Moshe writes in Shuvas that kli shlishi, the kuli alma, is not mavashal anymore. It's done being mavashal. Moshe holds it to an extreme. That's why he's matir to put the tea bag in a kli shlishi, even though it could be very hot. Because there's no bishul in a kli shlishi at all. But others are more machmer. First of all, we have the Chazon Ish on the other side, and also the others that are machmer by tea. We said last week is because they hold that it's very color mavashal, and even if you don't necessarily hold that the Chai Adam is chumrah by kli shlishi, the Chazon Ish is chumrah, but you still might hold it by tea. That's why the Mishnah Berurah do not bring down that eitzah when you talked about trying to look for eitzes for tea, he never brought down the eitzah al kli shlishi, because Vaishlas and Mishnah must hold that it's not a heter because it's still mavashal kli shlishi. Okay, going on to Sif. Any questions before we go on?
So again, the Chazanish was machmir to say that it's going to be mavashal even in kli shlishi.
Right. So maybe generally we don't go that way. Generally we're not machmir kli shlishi like our Moshe, but that's why many poskim are machmir for tea in a kli shlishi, because it's a tziruf of very kalavashal is one swore and the other swore is chazanish. So and here you see it mamish becomes tea. Moshe was docha that and said the fact that you see it mamish becomes tea is not a riot, because even if you put it in cold water long enough, it'll turn into, you'll taste the tea and you'll see the color of tea in there. So the fact that it turns into tea is not a riot to him. There's Gedolei Achronim already say that they've been a riot from Rishonim to that, but that's the Shalom poskim.
The Chazon Ish was dafka by tea or anything that's kalei bishul.
He held b'chlal, just not even kalei bishul. He held that yad nichveis po. The chumrah of the chayotim, Mishnah brings down, is not by kalei bishul, it's by anything. It's by putting meat in there also. With yad nichveis po, it still has a koach bishul to it. But I'm just saying that we, even if we hold not like Chazon Ish, and once it gets to kli shlishi, it lost the koach bishul, there's still makom hachmir by tea. So, but the Chazon Ish wasn't Ramosha's cup of tea. Okay. So klish yesh bo davar cham. The Shulchan Aruch said, "Vav klish yesh bo davar cham sheyatza lettuce bo." There's still something in it that's yatza lettuce bo. Mutter v'anicho b'Shabbos al gabe k'dera tmuna k'dei sheyishmor chuma v'lo yistanet. So we're putting, when we want to take this kli that has hot food still in it, and you want it to stay hot to serve it Friday night. So you put it, you have hatzmana going on. You started before Shabbos. You put towels around one, like a hot soup pot, for example. The soup pot's very hot, and you want to keep this hot. So on Shabbos, you take it off the fire, and you want it to stay hot for the guests are coming late, whatever. So so you want to put it. You're allowed to open up the hatzmana, the towels, even though you can't be matman the chatchila on Shabbos. That's a separate in din of hatzmana. But here it's not considered matman chatchila because it's already had mutman. So there's already hatzmana going on. And you're allowed to add to hatzmana that's already going on. We're allowed to do that. So over here, the Shulchan Aruch specifies that the food in the kli has to be yatza lettuce bo. So the Mishnah points out that that's the Shulchan Aruch the Jitaso, like we spoke out a number of times already. The Shulchan Aruch holds that in order to not be bishul achar bishul for a davar bushul, that's davar lach, it has to be yatza lettuce bo, to not be, can't be cooled down less than yatza lettuce bo. Otherwise, there is bishul. The Ramah in Siftas Vav, Siftal, and Rishon Gimel also, Ramah holds that as long as it's still warm, that's good enough, even if it's less than yatza lettuce bo. So according to the Ramah, this halach will apply. You could put it there on Shabbos even if it's still warm. It's one nakuda. There's another nakuda here that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't even point out, but it just says a klish whatever cham. The assumption is that it's called sorko. The Taz says a chiddush over here. Yeshua brings it down. The Taz says a chiddush that even if it is only mushal ma'achal ben soy, in this case it's okay. Even though we can't, Taz agrees you can't put something ma'achal ben soy onto a fire on Shabbos. You can't. If you say you want to do chazara, you have a cholent cooking or something cooking, and you want to take it off. Want to serve some, put it back on, and it's only ma'achal ben soy. Everyone agrees you cannot put it back on, even though some machlokas are shown when bishul occurs. If many Rishonim, including the Rashba and the Ran, hold that once it's ma'achal ben soy, there's no longer any bishul. Or machmar like the Rambam and the Rosh and Rashi, that bishul still occurs until muvushal tzarko. So for sure, la halacha, we can't put it back on. If you took it off the fire accidentally, you can't put it back on because you'll be bishul from ma'achal ben soy till muvushal tzarko, that whole interim. But the Taz holds that over here it's different. Here you're putting it on you're not putting it to cook, you're putting it just to stay warm. You're putting it not on a fire, you're putting it on another hatzmana, a pot that has hatzmana is covered by towels just to keep it warm, that's okay, even though it's only makabrender soy. But the Mishnah brings down that many achronim are cholik on this taz, and they hold that to put it in a place that's yatz lettucebo, that could get to yatz lettucebo, then even though your tachlis is to keep it warm, but it's a psik resha that will be some level of bishul going on just to bring it to the level of yatz lettucebo and keep it there. Then kol rega v'rega, it's still there's bashal more from that point on. So halacha, we have to make sure to do this. To this kula of sivvav is only going to be when it's mubash or called sarko. There's other nekudas here as well about the dough and everything. We're not going to go into that, but that's what mareach and other points over here. We're not going to go into that now. Okay, sif zayin and ches. The Gra says, and Mishmur brings it down twice, that the zayin and ches are really the same sif. Just we split it up between a davar cham that's that is warm still or hot, and a davar kar that, let's say, pieces of chicken that are already cooled down, that there's no isur bishul by them, and by both of them, really the diun of this sif is mixik hamavashal. So it brings down the sif zayin. Yesh meforshim dahadashar laniya klish yesh bo davar cham agabe kedera tmuna. That we said in sif vav, you could put it on a kedera that's tmuna. Afilu kliya takton al eish shari. It's even with her on eish al eish. You're allowed to put it on top of that pot. Yesh meforshim shim kliya takton al eish lo'olam asar. It's always going to be a problem. So the reason that so the machlokas over here, we have 2 days. Usually the klal is that if there's yesh omrim in the Shulchan Aruch, then we go by the second shita. Here he says yesh meforshim. We think it's like the second shita. We'll see in a minute in Sivches that he's machriya like the first shita over here. But the shaila is that it's a shaila mixik and mavashal, and we know that if you have, let's say, a kir that's grufa ktuma, if I want to take the chicken out of the fridge from Friday night, put it back to heat up for Shabbos day, I can't put it right onto the grufa katzim. I can put it on the blech because that's still mixik and mavashal. The blech is only there to minimize the heat, but it's not mafkia the mixik and mavashal. So we have to put it onto so that's the point over here, is you're putting it on another pot, and you're putting it on top of another pot that has food in it, it's cooking. So that takes away the mixik hamavashal. That's why it's okay according to the first day. The second shita holds that it's only considered the pot on there is nothing better than regular graf katzim, and it's still a problem. So here, Siv Zayin is talking about like marak or things that have liquid in it. The Siv Ches brings the same shaila by he says laniach davar kar is basha kol circle. I gave mecham al h, taking something cold and putting it on top of the mecham, on top of the heat. Yesh omrim shedino coming on top of. I'm sorry, the mecham would be on top of the like the samover, the urn. Yesh omrim shedino kamanicho keneged medura. Some say it's like keneged medura, not on it, just like near the bonfire or near the fireplace. That's not mixik and vashal because it's an abnormal place, not a normal place to cook. So putting it on top of another pot or on top of the urn is like putting a keneged medura, klape the din of mixik and vashal. Kol davar shemutar lanichol keneged medura malkum shiatz lettucebo. Any place you're allowed to put a keneged medura, you could also put it here. Yesh omrim, some say no. It's like putting it right on. It's like shia l'chatchila, which you know is a problem with mixik and mavashal. Even if it's totally cooked, it's a problem because mixik and mavashal. Even if it's stomach koralo, all that doesn't come into play when it's mixik and mavashal. The Shulchan Aruch ends off rishon near ikar. So here he's machriya like the second yesh omrim, and the Poskim also where he brings down that this hachra applies to Sif Zayin as well. So in both cases, he's saying that putting it on top of another pot is not mixik and mavashal. So the guy with that shaila we're saying on top of another pot. So the post can point out over here that Mishnah Berurah already said earlier in Reish and Gimel that to put it on this pot we're talking about, or the urn, is when there's water in the urn or where there's food in the pot. It would just be an empty pot, then that would just be like Gar Fakatan, that we were passing before. So that seems to be a struggle steer to our minhag, that we tell people that if you want to heat up the chicken, for example, just take it and put it on the blech. The fire is covered, but you put another upside down cookie dish or whatever, a cookie or some kind of upside down plate or pot, put it on top of that. So we consider that better than Gar Fakatan. We consider that to be like al-gaba or keneged Medura, not on the fire. So that in order that shouldn't be a steer to the Mishnah Berurah. I think that our minhag is the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Aruch here and all the posts we're talking about. If there is no other Gar Fakatan besides the pot that you're putting, so that it's an open fire and you're putting just an empty pot there. If you have food in the pot, so it's cooking, so then there's a reason that it's on there. Besides that, it's just covering the fire. There's a reason that it's there. It's cooking on itself on its own right. But it's like a rishus with neatzmo put on top of there. Then that takes away from the mitzvah kamavashal. That's like keneged Medura. But if you just put an empty pot there, there is no Gar Fakatan. That's why the Mishnah Berurah is saying that is no better than Gar Fakatan. You're just making it. The only reason the pot is there is to make it Gar Fakatan. So then that still could be mitzvah kamavashal. If it's like we have it always, that we have already Gar Fakatan, and then we're putting another pot on top of that, even if it's empty. So then on top of that pot would be not inside the pot, not that's regular derech bishul, but if the pot is covered or it's upside down, which makes it nicker that it's shalo derech bishulo. So then that extra thing you're adding, that makes the whole thing not derech bishul, and makes it mutter even according to the Mishnah Berurah. Okay.
Sorry, Rabbi, I'm not sure I fully caught that. Was Rabbi saying that the difference is whether it's covered or not? Meaning if the fire is covered or not, that's what the Mishnah Berurah is talking about, where the fire is not covered?
Right. That is the case of the Mishnah Berurah here in the whole Siv Zion and Ches, that it's not covered except for the pot.
And since we do it with the fire covered, that makes it that it would be okay with an empty pot to put it on it?
To put it on top of like an upside down pot or a covered pot. Because it's like one more step removed, so it makes it not derech bishul. I think even Mishnah Berurah will agree that we don't need this. We don't need this pot here to be Gar Fakatan. It's already Gar Fakatan. So what is it? It shows us that it's a shinui, and we're not doing derech bishul.
Right. It's not Mexican vashal. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Didn't we also say, Rabbi, that this also even the Chazon Ish is masking this din, even though he doesn't hold a blech? Didn't we say that?
Say again.
Rabbi also mentioned that the Chazon Ish is masking to this also, even though he doesn't hold the blech.
Right, he has to be matter because it's before Shulchan Aruch. This din, and we're talking about that the pot is bimkom Gar Fakatan, and better than Gar Fakatan. The Chazon Ish speaks out that not only is it Gar Fakatan, it's better than Gar Fakatan. That's why there he pointed this out based on these sifim. Yeah, what I was quoting before, that Mishnah Berurah says it is a problem when it's empty. That's actually a bir halacha, Reish and Gimel. We're just I didn't see anybody say this, but I think it's a davar pasha what I'm saying as a terrorist to the Armenic, to not a steer to the bir halacha. Okay, in Sif Tes, I think these are all things we spoke about, but not necessarily. I don't know if I might have thought of things this time through also. Okay, in Sif Tes we talk about the Kli Rishon. Even if you take it off of the fire, as long as you have lettuce bowl, you can't put tavlin in it. You cook the tavlin, but the Shulchan Aruch paskins that melach is okay. Salt is okay to put it in there because it needs, like the Gemara says, it needs bishla kabisr detura, means it needs a very, very solid bishul, like the bishul of cow's meat, which needs a lot of bishul. And the Yeshmisha Oser, some say it's also in a Kli Rishon, even meat that's maluach, even shal shor, because the salt is easy to cook. And the Ramah says even without coming onto that, in a Kli Rishon, you can't put a piece of meat even without melach, because forget the melach, but there's lecha, there's liquid, natural liquid in the meat, which you'll be mavashal when you put it in there. So even though the meat itself might take a while to get cooked, but the lecha inside of it will probably bring it to the darga of those who eat, those who today go into the restaurant and order raw meat. You know, it's like almost raw, like it's barely movable. Okay, so the shalos, our melach today, we're not going to go into the salt so much, but our salt today, for the most part, is all, the Mishnah Berurah says that the shalos salt only applies when it's not already mavushal. If it was mavushal already, and through that it became salt, such as like all the sea salt that was the majority of salt that was used, and a lot of times even through chafira, even if it was through a salt quarry dug out of the ground, they would often cook it to clean it up. But if it was, the only time this would be a shiloh would be if it's straight salt from the quarry that's raw. There's never been, like, raw, uncooked salt from the quarry. Only there'd be the shiloh. But our salt today has all been cooked already, so it's in bishul bishul. It's not a shiloh. It's what they're even with Kli Rishon. All the processed salt that we use.
There aren't any salts, Rebbe, that is dehydration considered cooking? Meaning if it's in the sun? I don't know. I mean, Mordechai and I were talking about this a little yesterday.
No, it would not be. That would be another example. If in the time of the Mishnah Berurah that wasn't matzah, I never really looked so much into how all salts are made. Some of these natural salts, it's possible that I don't know if they really do dehydration. I don't know. I mean, you have to look it up and see.
We were looking at Morton Salt's website, and it was not looking good for most of the salts.
Which website?
Morton Salt.
What they're just dehydration?
A lot of it's sun dehydration, or not even, or a lot of it's from quarries.
And they don't process it; they just use this. They just grind it up and straight.
They were saying they're describing the process. They did not mention any cooking. It could be there's parts that they're not mentioning, but.
Okay, so I take that back and say, okay, so Ian,
definitely wasn't too encouraging.
Yeah, look more into this question. Okay, so you can take what I said with a grain of salt. Okay, Sif Yud. Also, Litan Tavlin Makara with Aros Alayan, the Kli Rishon. We can't pour from a Kli Rishon into a kara that has tavlin in it. Okay. Yeah, the Mishnah Berurah says here, if you pour it straight from a Kli Rishon, it's also even b'diavad. That will be a case where it's also even b'diavad. But everybody asks on the Mishnah Berurah that the Fishi Tasai that was mentioned many times, that anything is told in a Safek poskim, Machov's a poskim, then b'diavad we say it's mutter. And there are many poskim that hold that Iri Kli Rishon has a din of Kli Sheni. In Yordea and Shabbos, it's a lot, many poskim hold that way. So it's a shaila that remain b'tzarach in on Mishnah Berurah. Why would it say it's aser even b'diavad if it's totally not Machov's a poskim? Whether Iri the Kli Rishon is called Kli Rishon or called Kli Sheni. And since it might be Kli Sheni and Kli Sheni and a mavashal, so that's a shaila. Maybe the Mishnah Berurah holds that tavlinim are kali levashal, but nobody really says that. So Tzorachin and Mishnah Berurah, why he says also even b'diavad. Okay, Sif Yud Aleph, we have the ambati, which we see here in Mishnah Berurah. It's not so huge, but in Beis Yosef, from those who saw, it's a pretty vast sugya of ambati. It's a very big sugya. And just to touch on a couple of points over here, that we see over here from the Shulchan Aruch, that an ambati is considered like a Kli Rishon. Even though Etzem is a Kli Sheni, right? We're not talking about the water wasn't cooked in it. The water was cooked somewhere else, and then it flows into the ambatia, into this bathtub. So this very large Kli, this ambati, now has a din of a Kli Rishon. So the shah is, why is it a Kli Rishon? If it was poured from if it was poured from a Kli Rishon, why do we give this a din? We don't find anywhere else that we give it a din of a Kli Rishon. And this seems to be working. Even everyone agrees to this. Even if you cholak on the Chai Adam by Yad Nichves Bo by Kli Sheni, that's Chiddush Chai Adam. Which word brought it as a Chiddush Chai Adam, not a Chiddush of Sifyat Aleph. You should say it's a raya from here. We see, obviously, it's not a raya from here. The question is why not? So the some folks can say that the reason that there's a special chomer over here, Shlomo Zalman and the Shulchan Shlomo speaks about it, that the reason it's here it's a Kli Rishon, like a Kli Rishon instead of like a Kli Sheni, is because the waters, the way they got into there, they were nizchal al gabi akarka. The way they had it set up in those days, you had I guess a boiling thing, and then it poured directly from there along the some shaft that in the ground or whatever that got it right into the ambatya. So since it never really was in the air, didn't have a cooling off time in the air to make it to downgrade it to a Kli Sheni. So it's still considered a Kli Rishon. So some say based on that, if it's the schila, the direct schila into it. So some folks can say that because of this, if you have water that you fill up, let's say a cup of water directly from the urn, and so it's a direct zachila, it's a direct pouring from one to the other, and there's no break in that. Some say that the water in that cup will also have a din of Kli Rishon. So Rav Shlomo Zalman is cholok on that, on those poskim. He says that first of all, the fact that the ambatya with al gabi karka didn't have air to cool it down, but even the short space between the urn and the cup, when you turn the urn on, when you open the urn and it pours into the cup below it, it goes through the air a little bit. That makes it already different than the ambatya. That's one nakuda. That's what Shlomo Zalman is cholok. Rav Yashuv is cholok on it as well for a different reason. He says that what we mentioned before, the Tosfos and Daf Mem, that it's only considered a Kli Rishon when you have the tziruf, you have the unit of the hot food or hot water, and the Kli, which is also hot as a Kli Rishon. Only that retains the koach of cooking, of heat, of rasikus that is able to be vashal. Mashenken over here, it's a cold cup, even though it might be directly zachal b'tocho, it's still a cold cup. So then the question then will be, then why an abatya then? Abatya is also cold walls. So why does it not cool down? Why would Rav Yashuv agree, and he has to agree, it's a Shulchan Aruch, it's a sugya, the Shulchan Aruch, the ambatya is a din of Kli Rishon. So Shlomo Zalman says that there's actually two dinim over here. There's two nakudas. One nakuda is that, like we said, it goes directly into it. Second nakuda is that yes, and it's all, and that water is mischamim harbe. It's it's heated a lot, so it's very, very hot. Number two is that there's mayim rabim. There's a lot of water. So when there's so much water, when there's such a volume of water, usually like in the normal cup or normal even pot you pour it into, so there's a lot of kli there for the amount of water that's there. But here there's in ambatya there's so much water connected to the kli, and so the kli doesn't have the koach to cool down that water. If you learn that shot, or if you learn the other shot in Tosfos, it's not, you don't need the units of the kli and the water to keep it hot, because it's so much water and it's so hot that it retains its heat even without the siruf and the siyua of a kli. So that's why ambatya is different. And nafkamina, which Shlomo Zalman says a nafkamina to this Torah would be if you pour boiling water, hot water into a thermos. So the point of the thermos is to keep it hot. So do you say now that the thermos has a din of a Kli Rishon? You pour it into the thermos and close it. So is that retain the din of a Kli Rishon? Shlomo Zalman says no, because even though you might have a lot of heat and didn't cool down, but it went through the air to get there, and number two, it doesn't have mayim merubim like an ambatya does. So you don't have the two nakudas you need for it to retain a din of Kli Rishon. So the thermos has a din of a Kli Sheni.
So according to Shlomo Zalman, Rabbi, so you have to have both. It has to be that it passed through the air and then cooled it down, and it also has to have. I'm just forgetting the second thing Rabbi just said.
No. He says that if you're missing any one of those, that's enough to downgrade it to a
Oh,
klisheni.
okay, fine.
But here from two sides, you have a reason why it's a klisheni.
Right, meaning because the water passed through the air, and also because of the amount of water is not enough.
Right. Okay, and one nakuda and sifyud bays. We're not going to really go into sifyud bays, but they would say that mecham shapinam and mayim chamim mutar litan and sokal mayim tzonin. You could pour cold water into it. The Ramah says merubim, a lot of cold water, in order to cool it down. And it's not considered bishul because it doesn't have a chance to muvashal the cold water until it cools down the hot water. So the Mishnah Berurah just points out that it's only mutar b'shvika achas. You pour it all in at one time. If you put it drop after drop, then every drop will get muvushal on the way. Even though the sum total of all the drops will cool down the hot water, but as they come in, they'll get mizbashal. Tipa at each as it comes in, will get mizbashal. So the heter of the Shulchan Aruch is only when you pour it all b'shvicha achas. And then Mishnah Berurah here goes into go into question of tziruf of are you strengthening the pot by pouring cold water into it? We're not going to go into that now. Not really our sugya. Okay, in Sifyud Gimel, mutar litan kiton shomayim osho shar mashkim v'kli shteni shef b'mayim chamin avo kli rishon asar. So you have a vessel that has cold water in it. So you put it to put into a kli sheni is okay, but not into a kli rishon. We don't say, even though kli rishon might be only mavashal certain things, kadei klipa, if you're not actually cooking it, but it's only mavashal kadei klipa, maybe you'll consider let's take a baby's bottle, which is the davar matzui that you want to heat up on Shabbos. You have a cold bottle in the fridge, you want to take it out and warm it up for the baby. So we don't put into a kli rishon, we put from the urn into another kli sheni, and then we put the bottle on that. And so even though it might be on mashal kadei klipa, we don't say that the bottle itself is already considered the kadei klipa to matter to put it into a kli rishon. So that's why it has to go into a kli sheni. Yeah, that's here's on this is where the Mishnah Berurah speaks of the kli sheni. Here's where he speaks out that nakuda that we mentioned before, that the Sifkat and Pei Zion, where he talks about the ladle. This is the other Mishnah Berurah that seemed to be Soser. Mishnah Berurah back before and about the soup in Sifhei. Here's where he says it's considered a kli rishon, especially if it's maler esichos. If you leave it in there long enough to mamish boil up, then he says vade make kli rishon. So maybe that makes it a little bit more of an issue if you left the ladle in there until it boiled up completely, and then you put it from that ladle into the bowl. So I'm not so sure if Minchas Yitzchak would say his kula that will consider it the bowl of kli shlishi in that case, if you mamish boiled it up that way. The Chazon Ish is machmer that way as well. But just the normal scooping, you're putting it in and out, you're scooping bowls of soup. So then it's never in there long enough to be considered boiled up inside there to become a kli rishon on its own right. A little.
It's kind of hard to be mitzamtzem. Like sometimes, the cholent pot, for example, the crock pot is so hot that like as soon as you take it out, you see steam coming out of the ladle.
The steam is okay. It doesn't bother us as long as it gets put into the next kli. That doesn't bother us.
I'm saying that it would have a din of kli rishon. It says ma'aler tichus, right?
No, maler sichos doesn't mean that. It means that you leave the ladle in the pot long enough that it would boil up. It could boil up in there as well. It would like be boiling up in the ladle. Not that maler sichos doesn't mean there's steam. It means that it'll boil up inside the ladle as well. You'll get the bubbles in the ladle too, boiling up. Okay. As some would say, that's the scoop. Okay. But not everybody would say that.
Rob, does that mean that in a silicon ladle, the new ones, that you can't have it can't turn into kli rishon? You can't heat up?
I would agree with that. But it would have to have something that can retain the heat itself in its own walls. An economy, right? Yeah. So when we say ladle, we mean the old time ladles that are cast iron or or at least metal ladles. But all the plastic ones, you're right. Good point. That would not even be nickel on the shala because they don't really get hot. For sure, not to the point of a clear region. That para. Okay. Now in Sifya Dalid, we're not going to go to all the details of it again. Hopefully, you have the notes from it. But we say that mutar litan kitan shomayim oshar mashkim keneged h lavik tinasan. As long as you put it keneged h, okay, we have that already. You could leave it there, and if it's going to be achite yatsa lettuce which here's the first time he explains what yatsa lettuce means. We've had this so many times, but here the Shulchan Aruch explains that means hainu makom shekreiso shel tinok nichveis bo. Also, the carbo h lamakom sheyochal is common for the yatsa. You can put it in a place where it can't get yatsa bo. It's also to put it if it's liquid and it's cooled down, then you can't put it to a place of it could be yatsa lettuce bo. And again, this we tell you the Shulchan Aruch will say it's usher as long as it's cooled down to begin with, less than yatsa lettuce bo, and the Ramah will say if it's cool lagamre, because if it's still warm, then you could put it back there. So the definition of this kreisa shatinok nichves bo, and what's considered yatsa lettuce bo. So we mentioned last time around a number of shitas. I'm not going into all of them now. We mentioned Shlomo Zalman brought rayos from Shchita, etc. That 45 degrees centigrade is the amount. But we also pointed out, we saw from Ramosha and others that shear that we said that we're machmir for, in other words, that would be the chumrah that if you put it in a place where it can get, right now it's cooled down completely. According to Rosalind, if you put it in a place near the fireplace, that it can get heated up to 45 degrees centigrade. Forgot right now what that is in Fahrenheit.
I think Rabbi said last time was 113.
Thank you. So if we can get to that heat, then that will be the chumrah not to put it there. But that's the chumrah. However, the kula, which would mean that if the other way around, let's say you cook something to 45 degrees, to 113. So according to Rishon Zalman, it's cooked already to yatsa lettuce bo. Now to take that, and let's say it stays at that heat, you have it on a hot plate, whatever, that got brought it to 113 degrees. Now you want to take that, you say, okay, it's cooked. It's yatsa lettuce bo. It's a cooked thing. So could I now take that and put it into? I want it to get even hotter to put it into pot on the fire. It was never cooked to the point of to the higher heat the fire gets to. That's a low level heat with yatsa lettuce bo. It's not resichus, not mamish boiling, but it's yatsa lettuce bo. You pull your hand off of it. It's considered cooked. But so to say at the kula, that the poskim all say that you can't say that because since there's a tzad that it's not mevushal until it gets much hotter and it gets a different degree of bishul completely. So Ramosha says until it gets to 170, only when it gets to 170 degrees, then you could take it and put it onto a pot on the fire. But if it's at the lower level and a lot, then there's no header to do that. And Rishon Zalman and Rosh agree with that. So what's a very important halacha l'maaseh from there is that some urns, the water doesn't really boil, mamish boil, but it brings it to it's just hot. It's hot. It gets to 45 degrees for sure, maybe more than that, but it doesn't get nearly to the heat of if it would be a pot on the fire. It doesn't get to the 170 degrees. So according to that, if you have the water from the urn and your chunt is getting dry, then you would not be allowed to take that water and put it into the chunt pot. I used to. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to always boil my water before I put it into the urn. I boil it up in a pot first, or one of those boiling things, those pitchers that boil, and then pour it from there and fill up the urn with that. So it's already mevushal lagamre. And then if it cools down to much lower, but it's still warm, it's still even yatsa lettuce bo, but even according to Shulchan Aruch, it's good. But even certainly in the Ramah, and then I could use that water to put it into the chuln pot. I haven't done that lately, so I've been sort of careful not to put it in the chillum pot. If it's dry, it's.
But Rebbe thinks like a lot of the urns now have the Shabbos setting, right? So meaning if someone just kept it on the Shabbos setting and put it in there, so that would for sure be an issue, meaning because it just gets it hot, it doesn't boil it. If someone boils it in that, it mamish boils the water. I doesn't think that's hot enough for 150, whatever.
Yeah, it's very. I think it might. I think it depends on the urn. It depends on the urn. So if it really boils up, then it moves mamish boiling. So even though it might not stay boiling when you put on the Shabbos mode, but it's keeping it hot from boiling, and that's okay. That's not a problem.
Right. So I mean, as long as it hits boiling point, that's fine. Meaning the water is mamish bubbling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's an important halacha. Okay. And Sifkas Vav. Sifkas Vav. So there we said. Davish and Spasha called Sarko, Bu Yavesh, Aim Bamarak, Mutter Lanicho, Keneged Medura, Filu Bamakum Shiaz Lesbo. Was told him you're allowed to put it Keneged Medura. You can't put it back on the fire directly because of Michsik Kabashal, but there is no bishul by it anymore. The Ramah says Filu in its standing fire, even if it was already cooled down by a Davar Yavesh, it's still okay. However, in Roseach, Filu Davar Sheyesh Bamarak Mutter. If it's still boiling, then it's okay even according to Shulchan Aruch. Even if those davar lach, v'yesh mekilim, that's a dasa shulchan aruch. V'yesh mekilim lomar the kol she'enu nosna al gabi ha'esh. Akira mamish rak samachlo afilu nistanin mutter. Some say even nistan is mutter, and those are the shitas that hold ein bishalach bishal even balach, which is the Rashba and the Ran and other Rishonim. The Ramah says v'nogu lahakal lazeh im lo nistan al lagamrei k'moshe kasavnu el sifri Mishnah Gimel. That, like I already said in Mishnah Gimel, that the minig is to be makel. Even if it's not nistan on the gamri, you can still feel the warmth within it. So there's still a leftover. So we mentioned many times, just to chazer over quickly, that it's a machlokas of poskim. It's of the pshat in this Ramah. This heter of lo nistan on the gamri, is it a chumrah or is it a kula? Meaning, is it really the Ramah holds like the Shulchan Aruch, Mikra din, that la halach we paskin that. Yesh bishalach bishal balach that got cooled down the gamri, like the Rambam and like the Rashi and the Rosh and other Rishonim, not like the Ran and the Rosh but hold that ein bishalach bishal even balach in the stanan. Once something was cooked, even lach, it's already a different nature, and even though it's not so nicker, but it's still a different chesa once it was in the bushel. And so ein bishalach bishal even if it cooled down completely. So the Ramah holds not that way. He holds that there is an Isser bishal if it was cooled down the gamri, but the Ramah is saying a big kula in that it's, as long as it's still warm, then just like davar yavesh, that's like a piece of chicken, the bishul is still nicker in even when it's cooled down, because it's enodoma, a cooked piece of chicken to a uncooked piece of chicken, so it still remains cooked even when it's cold. It's mishtana to be davar mavashol. Huadin a davar lach, a soup or even water that's was cooked and now it's still warm, it's still the bishul still nicker in it through the warmth of it, and it's enough to be warm to be nicker the bishul in it, and therefore ein bishalach bishul. So it's a kula in yesh bishalach bishul that in this case not because it's still nicker, or the Ramah saying a chumrah really nicker dini paskins that ein bishalach bishul balach. He really paskins like the Rashba and the Ran. He's just saying a chumrah in that we're not in order that it shouldn't be mixed with vashal and it shouldn't come to be vashal something that's mamish, because it's hard to tell between water that was cooked and wasn't cooked. You can't really tell the difference. So if I heat up water that was already cooked, people will think I'm allowed to just heat up water on Shabbos. So therefore, he's matir it only when it's still nicker in it that was mavushal. So it's a chumrah within the shita that ein bishalach bishul. That's shal nirma. Is it a chumrah in ein bishalach bishul, or is it a kula in yesh bishalach bishul? So that's a machlokas of poskim. We spoke out the Magen Avraham holds that the Ramah, leave the Ramah, that if it would be totally cooled down, that there would be bishul b'deraisa. So the Magen Avraham holds that it's a kula in that, but the Mishnah Berurah over here goes not that way, and also Moshe, Chazon Ish, Rav Yashiv all learned in the Mishnah Berurah that he's saying a chumer, not a kula. Ramah would only say what he says if he held ein bishul achar bishul, even by davar lach, and that's why he's being so makel to say that warm is enough. And it's mashma like that from the Ramah itself. And lashon Ramah is mashma the second way, because he says yesh mekilim lomar davar the kol she'enu nosna al gali eish. There's no problem whenever it's not a problem of mistaken vashel. A few in the stand in the gamri is mutter. It's a Magi Mishnah as well. He quotes the Magi Mishnah, which that's one of the he's part of that shita. So on that shita that he brings, like Magi Mishnah, like the Rashba and the Ran, that in Bishul, on that he says that we're knowing to make like that as long as it's not a stand on the gamri. So the Mashmosa Ramah is much more mashma, not like the Maggid Avraham. Maybe that's why all the poskim held not that way. And we said enough Kamina Lalacha in this that we mentioned the Minchas Kohen that's brought down that what's the difference between Lach and Yavish? There was a question. Most poskim seem to say that Mishnah Berurah says that it has to be poured out the liquid completely. So if any liquid there at all, then it's still not considered a davar yavish, it's considered davar lach. Even though the ikar and the robe and everything is the chicken, but you still have gravy in there, then it's still considered davar lach. You have to pour it out completely to be davar yavish. But the Minchas Kohen, which brought down by the Pri Megadim and others, Minchas Kohen holds that as long as rove is davar yavish, then the miyud is batal to it, and it's not a problem of bishul achar bishul balach. So it was a pella. Everybody asked the pella on this because that most poskim were kolik on it. How could there be such a thing? How does rove and miyut over here work? It's fine. It's rove, but still you have a whole amount of lach there that you're mivashal. Davar nicker this lach. You're over in this bishul on that. How could there be such a kula? So Moshe said in the tshuva, which we quoted before, that the pshat in Minchas Kohen is that ikar din Minchas Kohen paskins like it holds according to Ramah. Ain't bishul achar bishul balach at all. There's no bishul, but there's a chumrah there, Ramah, that you shouldn't come to make a mistake. You can think you can heat up things that are not cooked at all. So for that, as long as it's rove, for that chumrah, as long as it's rove yavesh, no one's going to make that mistake by the little bit of lach that's there, and therefore it'll be mutter even if it's stan legamrei, because no makom for the Minchas Kohen holds. There's no makom for a chumrah when it's for that chumrah as long as it's ruba yavesh. So that's the heter of the Minchas Kohen is built on this havana of the Ramah. The Ramah holds that mikra din there is no bishul achar bishul. That's a shot, and that's why Moshe says b'shas tchak gadol. Then you can be samach on Minchas Kohen. And so we said, like in a situation of Shabbaton that you had the cholent is cold or whatever, it got cooled down, that you want to heat it back up again, then that would be a shas tchak gadol that Moshe would say you're allowed to reheat that, preferably idea goy, but there's a welcome to put it back on there to reheat, to be samach on the rove that it's yavish. Okay, just a couple more nakudas here and we're done. Sit Zion. We saw by the panda over here that you're heating up this knish that has the fat in it. Even you put it next to the eish makom yas lettuce bow, even though the shuman is the snikrash, even though you have the congealed fat in there that's going to melt and become oily and now come out and become liquid. And generally, we know that we have and later on in Shulchan Aruch and Sim and Shin Chaf, we can't take ice and melt the ice on Shabbos. Certainly you can't do it biyadayim, but because if you're taking a solid and turning it into a liquid, so why over here is it okay? So and not only is that's a shalad derabbanan. Here it's a shalad deraisa. If it's going to become lach, then right now it's nistan, it's cold. So why shouldn't you say that you're being over at Isra Bishul by davar lach? So we see over here a klal gadol. The Mishnah Berurah says that since b'shas hanacha, the time you did the malacha, you put it down, it was a davar yavesh. Right now, then it was a davar yavesh. So then, even though it's going to become lach afterwards, when you put it down, it was davar yavesh. So then it has a din of ein bishul achar bishul b'davar yavesh. So we see a klal gadol that we go after tchilas malacha, shas malacha. We don't go look at the outcome. We look at what it is b'shaita when you put it down. So klal gadol, very important klal. And this is different than, let's say, melting the snow in Sunchaf Siftes, because there it's a problem, because even though melting that. Right now, it's still a solid thing. Since over there you're doing it might be a dime, you're holding it in your hands, melting it. So then that's dumiyat malacha, and that's why it's also over there. It's an issur d'Rabbanan, but it would not be an issur d'Oraisa if b'shaita it's davar yavish. There it also might be different. There's a difference in that also. Another chiluk, which is going to come up, will be enough community in a moment, but that since ice at room temperature is liquid, so even though right now it's yavish, we look at it as a liquid. Mashenken, this congealed fat at room temperature, it'll stay congealed. It'll just only through the heat. By heating it, will cool down. Put it adjacent to the heat. So that's room temperature is kaveh what it is me'ikar din. Now, a nafkamina in this is that Rav Moshe was matir to put butter onto a hot potato on Shabbos. He writes in a tshuva it's mutter because it's exactly this sif. You put on hot potato, so hot potato is not on the fire. It's a davar gush. The reason to be machmer would be davar gush, even though it's very hot. So if the butter is considered davar lach, then it would be a problem. But the Rosh says it's exactly this sif. Right now, it's b'shas anocha. It's a davar yavish. And it was this basha. It was already cooked at the time of the pasteurization. It was cooked already, and now it's hard. So now you look at it by what it is now. Now b'shaito, it's a davar yavish smutter. Shlomo Zalman says disagrees. Shlomo Zalman pointed that when it was cooked, it was still milk. When it was pasteurized and everything, that's when it was still milk. So the cooking and pasteurization process was still liquid, and then it was only nikrashed later on. It was never cooked to begin with as a davar yavesh. The fat, with the meat the fat came from was cooked when it was in the meat, so it was cooked already as a davar yavesh. Then it became liquidy, and then it was choser the nikrash. It went back and congealed. So there was a bishul in it when it was already a davar yavesh, and now it's a davar yavesh again. So ein bishul bishul davar yavesh. That's why our sif mashen came by the butter. It was never cooked as a davar yavesh. It was cooked as a davar lach. And it cooled down as a davar lach. You just took that davar lach and you did the what's called the process of butter to turn it into butter. So it was never cooked as a davar yavesh. So the davar yavesh is a davar chadash, and therefore it's not considered nichlal in this heter of this sif. So that's that was Shlomo Zalman time is.
Did you be mitzaref that the potato itself is like davar gush and there's deos that it's klisheni?
So Shlomo Zalman himself ends off tzarachian. What you're saying, he says like Dor that maybe you could be mekol because of the b'tzir of the shitas that a davar gush is a klisheni. So he's not machlit 100% that it's aser, but he's called on Rav Moshe's lamdas though. So, but there might be other reasons to be mekol, not because of Rav Moshe's reason, but because maybe b'tzir of the deos that it's a klisheni. Which would mean to say the following: it would mean to say that even though Rav Moshe's heter would not apply, but suf kosuf, the milk was cooked. So according to the Ramah, Maker Din, he holds the ein b'shalach or b'shal balach. So you have a combination. You have a svek now. You have b'shal balach by the milk, and you have a machlokas whether yesh b'shal but what do you call it with a davar gush. So he says tzarachin, maybe there is room to be made because of that, not because our Moshe's reasoning, because of that. Okay. Okay. Just to bring out another nakuda over here, this klal that we see from this sif that we go after the shas hanacha, we look at it the way it is now. Rav Shlomo Zalman answers another problem with this. Rav Shlomo Zalman has a problem that how could I ever do chazara on, let's say, if I have a cholent that's totally cooked and it has a lot of liquid in it, I'm allowed to put it back on the fire, right? Let's say I have a Friday night cholent, and I have a guest over, for an only Friday night. So I take it off the fire with das to put it back on because I want to serve it tomorrow. So I take out some cholent and I put it back on. It's all liquidy now Friday night. It's geschmack. It's really yummy and geschmack and everything, and I want to have it for tomorrow as well. How can I put it back on? Because maybe by tomorrow, it's possible that all the liquid will boil out. If it all boils out, now it becomes no longer. I'm not doing bishul anymore. I'm doing tzli, because it's called tzli kedar. Tzli kedar is tzli in a vessel, in a pot. So something totally dry, put on the fire. Usual tzli is connected to the fire with no pot, but there's a thing called tzli kedar. It's also a type of tzli. So why I'm not choshesh that I'm initiating a process. I'm starting off bishul now, but now I'm going to cause tzli akar bishul. If we're machmer and sitei, that yes, tzli akar bishul. How's that mutter? So Rishon Zalman answer is, we see if the klal is in our sif over here, that just like we say about the fat that's congealed, right now when I put it on, it's congealed, it's davar yavesh, even though it's going to melt and become a liquid, it's still okay. I go after the time of the hanacha. Huadin, when I put the cholent pot back on by chazara, it's still bishul. It's still lach right now. Even though it might turn later into tzli, it's not a problem. That's what Shlomo Zalman answers. Now, we could also be doka this for another reason. It's not a raya.
Sorry, Kurt.
Yeah.
Could I just reiterate that last point one more time, or someone says it's not an issue?
So based on the klal of our siman here, that everything goes after the shas hanacha, the shas ma'isa malacha. So since the shas ma'isa malacha, when you return the cholent Friday night, it was still wet, and therefore it's bishul, even though it might turn into tzli later on, that doesn't concern me. That's his answer. And there is a way to be docha that as well, that the Chazon Ish holds that it's based on a bir halacha. Bir halacha in Sif Tesvav here says, asks the question that how are you allowed to heat up in a pot something that was dry and already was bashal? Isn't it sliach bishul? Isn't that sliach bishul? Right? We take the chicken. We have, let's say, boiled chicken. And you want to heat it up afterwards. You put it in a pot and you want to put it on the fire, like we're saying, upside down on the blech and upside down tray, the whole thing. But right now, the only reason you're allowed to put it back on the fire is because it's a davar yavesh. So although it was cooked in the soup to begin with, that chicken, now it's yavesh. So now you're putting a pot of chicken yavesh onto the fire, which of course would be tzli akar bishul. It wasn't tzli before Shabbos. It was bishul before Shabbos. Now you're doing tzli kedar. That's a kasha of the bir halacha. So the Chazon Ish answers that we see that from here, this heter, that the whole din of tzli akar bishul and bishul akar tzli and all these things are only when the new heating up will be a shinui b'taimoi, similar to the bishul of the matzah that has to change the tam, and that's why some Rishonim say that's different because you need tam matzah. Like the bishul, like a matzah that's cooked has a totally different taste than a matzah that was not cooked; it was just baked. That's why there's bishul akar afiyah. But masha'enken, if you just take chicken, you just heat it up. It was cooked chicken. Now you heat it up. It's not the heating it up is not going to turn it into taste like roasted chicken. It's going to taste like heated up cooked chicken. So since it's not going to make a shinu v'tamoi, then there's no isser of tzli akar bishul. It's a chiddush to the Chazon Ish. So if you say like that, then you can answer Shlomo Zalman's kasha in a different way. You could say that it's not going to be. It's still a cholent. It still doesn't taste like tzli. Even whether it's wet or dry, it's still a cholent. It's not like a davar solo. According to Chazon Ish, the kasha doesn't really begin. But Shlomo Zalman still needs his teretz because the Mishnah Berurah asked this kasha and didn't answer like Chazon Ish. So the Mishnah Berurah needs to learn that it's just a dry din that ain't sli akar bishul, and that's why he had the kasha of the chicken, heating up the chicken. So based on that kasha of the Mishnah Berurah doesn't hold like the Chazon Ish. Shlomo Zalman comes onto a new swara and says everything goes after the shas hanacha based on our sif. That's why he has to come onto his teretz. Okay. When we're running a little late, but we just want to finish off here. In Sifyat Zion, Asolite and Sona and Afila Hafshir Kol Shamecham Cham Kokach Filo Haya Menicha Sham Harbe Haya Balide Bishul, which we got to let us go. So you're not allowed to put Sona in Another, we just learned from this, if you're not allowed to be samach on your das, you can only put it in a place where it can't get there, but not if you put it in a place where it could get there, it could get to that heat. We're not samach on your das to take it away. We're always worried about shikha, and therefore you can't put it in a place where it could get there. Rishon Zalman has a question about if you set an alarm clock, is that okay? Or if you, not an alarm clock, but he says if you let's say you put it in a place where it could get there, but you put it on a timer. It's going to turn off before it would get there. So Nikra din, it probably shouldn't be a problem. The question is that a Marasign, he's matter it as long as it's Nikra to anybody who sees it, that there's going to be a shut off time. I'm not sure how you do that, but the claw is still a claw. Right, Sif Yud Ches, last sif over here that we have the here the din of Klirishon and Ilfas Vakadera Shevirim al Rusachim al Gavia, or you learn this Bashal called Sarko. Aim with the kapping, you can't take out. Let's say you take a cholent off the fire. So Shulchan Aruch says that if it's not Mizbashal called Sarko, then you can't scoop out of that. Let's say it got to Michael Bender soy, you can't scoop out with a ladle. Shenusa megis, because you're stirring it. By doing that, if it's not Mizbashal called Sarko, by stirring it, then you're gonna, by taking out with the ladle, by stirring it, the stirring itself will bring the uncooked parts of it to become more cooked. When it's bashakot sarko, but if it was bashakot sarko, then it's mutar. That's okay. So now, according to this, what Shulchan Aruch is saying, that even if it's bashakot sarko, you still can't take it off the pot if it's on the fire. If it's still on the fire. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down here. It's in the Sharat Sion Kufam above, brings from the kolbo. Kolbo is famous kolbo, and it's a famous kasha on the kolbo that the whole world doesn't understand. Everyone in the world, so much ink was spilled over this kolbo that it says that even never Moshe called Sarko, if you stir it while it's on the fire, then that has an Isser Bishul to it. It's your Chayav Chatas. Yes, Chatas, since it's Ala Eish. So Magen Avraham brings this down. He brings it here, and he also brings it in the Sharat Sion in the very end of the Siman, the very last Sharat Sion in the Siman. And the Mishnah Berurah at the very end quotes it there again, and here he says, "V'lo eda hatam." I don't understand. Don't know the reason for the kolbo. Demai adifa hagasa bishul mamish. Why is stirring better than bishul itself? In other words, if I take a pot off the fire, I take a chon pot, there's Moshe called Sarko, off the fire to stir some, and I have das, I can put it back on again. So I see that I'm not worried that there's more cooking to do in this pot, which allows me to put it back in the fire. So if that's okay, it's okay to put it on the fire in Shabbos to return it back to the fire, where mamish putting it on the fire from off the fire onto the fire. Why is it a problem to stir it, to stir the pot? Why is it the whole poskin loydin to Ushkol Sarko and Mishum Bishul? Everyone agrees that Ushkol Sarko there's no Bishul. Furthermore, so so the Akopanim b'diavad b'vaday and lesser b'zeh kadash arpos. Even though it should be makbar l'chamchila because it is a kolbo when he says it, but b'diavad would say it's mutter. So we spoke last time a little bit about it, and that there are many poskim that hold that he means only the Rabbanan. It's only because it looks like Bishul, even though he says lashon chiyuv chatas, and Ramosha is one who tries to explain it that it is deraisa, that maybe they're to take it off the fire and back on the fire, it won't cook it more because whatever's cooked is cooked already. But if you stir it, there's always kartin. There's little bits that are stuck together that if you might separate them by stirring it, and therefore pieces will get cooked that weren't cooked before. But I have a kasha on that shot. If that's the shot and it's why it's deraisa, then why would the kolbo say you're chayav chatos? Because those kartin don't have a shear of a kagogeris to be chayav bishul to be chayav a korban. Even though it might be bits of bishul, so it might be a chatzi shear of some Torah, is not enough to be a chayav chatos. So that's a kasha on that as well. Al-Kapanim, that's the kolbo that we're machmer for. And the very last thing in seafood test, that you can't take a piece of meat and Keneged and Medura put oil onto it, because even though the meat is already cooked, but now the oil is going to get cooked keneged Amadura. And Mishnah Berurah says lav dafka keneged Amadura. It'll be also to put the oil onto it, even not keneged Amadura, because it's right now the meat is very hot and it's a davar gush. So if you kosher, there's still also to put it on the mitzad that it's davar gush. Okay, those are some of the main nakudas to the rest of the siman. And no more questions, then Mr. Hashem, a little later today I'll send out the bechina, and Mr. Hashem will have a freilich in Purim, and I'm sure you have nothing else to do on Purim. You could just sit and horror over the bechina and chazer shin ches one more time on Purim, and yeshivas Mordechai Tzaddik.
Amen.
We should all be zoket. We should all be zoket to be mevushal kol tzarko, and raseach, not just poishrim, not just warm, but we should be raseach and mala rasichus. They said there's a ma'aser of Chaim Shulevitz. Once he was giving a hesped on a certain Adam Gadol. I just thought of this now. There was Chaim Adam Gadol was niftar, and Chaim Shulevitz, the mirror, was saying a hesped on him, and he said that there is some people. He said, like, sometimes you have a pot that it's like boils a little bit and then it cools down, boils a little bit and cools down, because it never got to really a full boil. When it gets to a full boil, then it never stops boiling. It stays at the resichos. He said that Adam Gadol, it was like the second thing. He was always on boil. He was always he never cooled down. He was always going full speed ahead and always like on fire and always boiling. So his father-in-law was listening. Relays Yodel Finkel, who was next to him, and said, Chaim doesn't realize he's talking about himself. So shall all be zocha to be vushakol sarko mal resichos and never cool down.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Rabbi, so when are we starting the next sugya? Would be.
It's a good question. I'm going to see how much time is left after the bechina. If it's a bechitei shiyasu, start the next sugya, because I go into a week or so into Nisan, closer to Pesach. But this year I'm leaving Rosh Chodesh Nisan for Eretz Yisrael, so it was hard to do that from there. But unless we see what we have a sugya we can give out that we can start working on, which will be. I think we're all masking. We'll do Bishul Akum next. It's like once we're in Bishul, might as well we'll do their Bishul too. Our Bishul and their Bishul. Aniratzim, Main Ratzim, we'll do theirs too.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Avi. Have a great Purim. Friday, everybody. All right. Good Shabbos.